Aisha learned early that poverty was her only crime. When her dirty hand left a smudge on the pearl-white luxury car, the beating started instantly. Blood dripped from her lip as the crowd shouted, "Thief!" But the tall stranger in the tailored suit, who emerged from the shadows, didn't see a criminal. He saw the woman he'd been searching for his entire life. What happens next will expose how the world treats the poor until one man steps in. The morning sun barely filtered through the cracked window of the overcrowded group home where 17-year-old Aisha had lived for the past 9 years. She woke at 4:30 in the morning, same as every day, her body aching from yesterday's triple shift. The bunk bed above her creaked as another girl rolled over in sleep. Aisha moved quietly, not wanting to wake anyone, pulling on her faded jeans and the cleanest of her 3 worn shirts. She caught her reflection in the small mirror, hanging by the bathroom. Tired brown eyes, hair pulled back into a simple ponytail, her mother's gold locket resting against her collarbone. It was the only thing she had left from before the car accident that killed both her parents when she was 8, before the relatives who never came forward to claim her, before she learned that being alone meant working 3 times as hard just to survive. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed with her work uniforms, and slipped out into the cold morning darkness. By 5 o'clock, Aisha was pushing a cleaning cart through the empty halls of a downtown office building, her first job of the day. She scrubbed toilets, emptied trash bins, vacuumed carpets in spaces where people in expensive suits would arrive in a few hours, never noticing the girl who made their workspace clean. Her hands were raw from chemicals, her back hurt from bending, but she worked with steady determination. This job paid for her bus pass and her phone bill. At 7, she clocked out and headed to school, sitting in the back of her classes, fighting exhaustion, scribbling notes while other students complained about being tired from staying up late watching movies. After school ended at 2:30, she rushed to her second job at Betty's Diner on 5th Street. She tied on her apron, forced a smile, and served burgers and fries to customers who sometimes left decent tips and sometimes left nothing but mess and complaints. The diner shift ran until 7, and then she had exactly 45 minutes to get across town to her third job, stocking shelves at a 24-hour convenience store until 11 at night. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, all to save money for a dream that seemed impossible: college, a degree, a life that mattered. On this particular Tuesday, something unexpected happened during her diner shift. A pipe burst in the kitchen, flooding the floor and forcing Betty to close early for repairs. Aisha found herself with 3 unexpected free hours before her convenience store shift started. She stood on the sidewalk outside the diner, unsure what to do with this strange gift of time. Her feet hurt, her uniform smelled like grease, but the afternoon sun felt warm on her face. Instead of taking her usual bus route home to the group home, she decided to walk through a part of town she had never explored before. The wealthy district, the place where people drove cars that cost more than she would make in 10 years of her 3 jobs combined. She told herself she was just curious, just wanted to see how the other half lived, but truthfully, she wanted to feel like she existed in a world bigger than group homes and grease-stained aprons and fluorescent-lit convenience stores. The streets changed as she walked. Clean sidewalks replaced cracked concrete, boutiques with French names replaced dollar stores. People walked past her in designer clothes, carrying shopping bags, laughing into expensive phones. Aisha felt invisible here, like a ghost drifting through a world that was never meant for her. She kept her head down, her hands shoved in her pockets, trying not to draw attention. That's when she saw it. The car. A pearl-white Mercedes parked outside an exclusive boutique called Lavish. The vehicle gleamed in the afternoon sunlight like something from another dimension. Aisha had never seen anything so beautiful. The paint was flawless. The chrome accents caught the light. The leather interior, visible through the windows, looked softer than any bed she had ever slept in. She stopped walking. She knew she should keep moving, knew she didn't belong here, but something pulled her closer. Just a few steps, just to see it up close, just for a moment. She stood beside the car, careful not to touch it, just admiring the craftsmanship. She could see her reflection in the polished door, a tired girl in cheap clothes, out of place and out of her league. But for just a second, she let herself imagine. What would it feel like to own something this beautiful? To have money for things beyond survival? To live without constant fear and exhaustion? Her hand moved almost without her permission. Her fingers, rough from work and chemicals, reached out and touched the smooth paint. Just touched it. The metal was cool and perfect under her palm. She pulled her hand back immediately, noticing she had left a small smudge, a mark from her day of work. Guilt flooded through her. She used the sleeve of her shirt to try to wipe the smudge away, leaning in close, concentrating on removing any trace that she had been there. The voice came like a thunderclap. "What do you think you're doing, you little thief?" Aisha jerked back, her heart exploding in her chest. A massive security guard stormed out of the boutique, his face twisted with rage. His name tag read, Winston. He was at least 6'4", built like he spent every free moment in a gym, and he was moving toward her with frightening speed. I was just looking," Aisha stammered, backing away, her hands up in surrender. But Winston wasn't listening. He grabbed her arm with brutal force, his fingers digging into her flesh, hard enough to leave bruises. "Just looking. You were casing it. I saw you touching it." He yanked her away from the car so violently that she stumbled, her knee hitting the pavement. Pain shot through her leg. She tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. "Please, I wasn't stealing anything. I just touched it. I'm sorry. I'll leave." Her words came out in a panicked rush, but Winston's expression only hardened. He dragged her to her feet, and before she could process what was happening, his open hand connected with her face in a vicious slap. The world spun. Aisha's head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding in pain. She tasted blood, felt it on her lip where the impact had split the skin. Tears sprang to her eyes, not just from pain, but from shock and humiliation. "I wasn't stealing," she whispered, her voice breaking. Winston shoved her against the brick wall of the boutique, his face inches from hers. "Girls like you always have excuses. You were planning to break in, weren't you? Probably got friends nearby ready to help you steal it." His breath was hot on her face. She shook her head desperately, but he wasn't interested in truth. He grabbed the collar of her shirt and pushed her harder against the wall, the rough brick scraping her back. "I should beat some sense into you right now." And he might have, except people were starting to notice. A crowd was gathering, but the crowd didn't come to help. They came to watch. Well-dressed shoppers emerged from stores, drawn by the commotion, like sharks to blood in the water. Within moments, Aisha found herself surrounded by at least 20 people, and every single one of them looked at her with disgust. A woman in a fur coat, despite the warm weather, wrinkled her nose. Probably homeless. They're everywhere these days, making the neighborhood look bad. A man in an expensive suit pulled out his phone and started recording. "Got to document this. These people need to be held accountable." Two teenage girls in designer jeans whispered to each other and laughed, already typing on their phones, probably posting to social media. Not one person asked if Aisha was okay. Not one person questioned why a grown man was assaulting a teenage girl. They just watched, judged, and recorded. Winston seemed emboldened by the audience. He grabbed Aisha by both shoulders and shook her. "Empty your pockets now. Let's see what you've stolen." Aisha's hands trembled as she complied. She reached into her jeans pockets and pulled out everything she had. $14.37 in crumpled bills and coins. her bus pass, her mother's gold locket that she sometimes carried when she needed to feel close to her parents. The items fell onto the pavement between them. Winston snatched up the locket, holding it to the light. "Where'd you steal this from?" His accusation cut through her like a blade. "That was my mother's." Aisha lunged for it, desperation overriding fear. "Please, it's all I have of her. Please don't take it." But Winston was faster and stronger. He shoved her back so hard she fell, her worn dress tearing at the shoulder as she hit the ground. He pocketed the locket, claiming it as evidence. The crowd murmured approval. "Good," someone said. "These people need to learn they can't just take what they want." Another voice chimed in, probably stolen from someone else originally. "Girls like that don't own real gold." The boutique manager appeared then, a tall woman named Veronica with perfect makeup and a designer dress that probably cost more than Aisha made in 6 months. She looked down at Aisha on the pavement with pure contempt. "What's going on here, Winston?" The security guard stood straighter, performing for his boss. "Caught this trash trying to vandalize the Mercedes, ma'am. She put her dirty hands all over it. I've detained her and I'm about to call the police." Veronica's eyes went cold. "Call them. I want her arrested. That vehicle is worth $200,000. She could have damaged it. We need to make an example." The crowd erupted in agreement. "Call the cops," someone shouted. Others joined in, chanting, "Call the cops! Call the cops!" like Aisha was some kind of dangerous criminal instead of a terrified girl who had made the mistake of touching something beautiful. Aisha curled into herself on the cold pavement, her torn dress exposing her shoulder, blood still dripping from her lip, her whole body shaking with sobs. This couldn't be happening. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had just touched a car, just for a second, and now she was being beaten, robbed of her mother's locket, and about to be arrested while dozens of people watched and did nothing. She thought about her dreams of college, of becoming someone, of mattering. Those dreams felt like jokes now. She was exactly what these people saw, worthless, invisible, someone the world could hurt without consequence. She closed her eyes and prayed silently for anyone, anything, to help her. She had never felt more alone in her entire life. That's when she heard it, the deep rumble of a powerful engine. The crowd's chanting faltered, then stopped. Aisha opened her eyes and through her tears saw people turning, parting like a curtain. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb directly behind the white Mercedes. The engine cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. The street fell eerily quiet. Everyone watched the SUV, waiting. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, easily 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal gray tailored suit perfectly. His skin was a deep brown, his head cleanly shaved, his jaw strong and defined. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that made people instinctively step back and make room. This was a man used to being in control, used to being respected. His dark eyes scanned the scene with sharp intelligence. Aisha on the ground, blood on her face, her dress torn, Winston standing over her. With self-righteous fury, Veronica beside him with arms crossed, the crowd of onlookers with their phones out. His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He walked forward with measured, deliberate steps, and the crowd parted further, instinctively recognizing power when they saw it. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Every person in that crowd heard him clearly. Winston straightened up, his demeanor shifting instantly from aggressor to professional. "Sir, I caught this girl vandalizing the Mercedes. I've detained her and we're about to call the police. Nothing to worry about, sir. Situation is under control." The man, his name was Darius King, though Aisha didn't know that yet, looked from Winston to Aisha. Their eyes met for the first time. In that moment, something passed between them that neither could explain. Aisha saw kindness in his gaze, concern, and something else she couldn't name. Darius saw a young woman who had been brutalized for no reason, and he felt something shift in his chest. Some door opening that he hadn't known was closed. He looked back at Winston, his expression carefully neutral. "Vandalizing, that's a serious accusation. Show me the damage." Winston gestured to the white Mercedes with confidence. "She had her hands all over it, sir. Put her dirty fingers on the paint. Was probably trying to break in when I stopped her." Darius walked to the car slowly, examining it from every angle. The crowd watched in silence. He ran his hand along the door where Aisha had touched it, finding the barely visible smudge she had tried to wipe away. He studied it for a long moment. Then he turned to Veronica, who was watching with growing unease. "You were going to have her arrested for this?" His tone was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. Veronica lifted her chin defensively. "It's an expensive vehicle, and people like her need to learn—" Darius cut her off. "People like her. Finish that sentence. I want to hear you say exactly what you mean." The manager's mouth opened and closed. She couldn't finish. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Darius reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a key fob. He pressed a button. The white Mercedes's lights flashed. The doors unlocked with a soft click. The sound echoed in the sudden silence like a gunshot. The crowd gasped. Winston's face went pale. Veronica's confident expression crumbled into horror. Darius spoke quietly, but every word landed like a hammer. "This is my car. I bought it yesterday from the dealership downtown. Had it delivered here this morning while I was in a meeting." He paused, letting that sink in. "And this young woman touched it. That's all she did. She touched it." He turned to look at Winston with eyes that could have frozen fire. "You beat a child for touching a car." The security guard tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but Darius wasn't finished. "You put your hands on her. I can see the blood on her face. I can see her dress is torn. I can see the marks on her arms where you grabbed her." He turned to Veronica. "And you encouraged this. You called her trash. You demanded her arrest." Then he addressed the crowd, his voice rising slightly for the first time, filled with controlled fury. "And all of you filmed it, laughed, posted it online for entertainment, chanted for her to be arrested. Not one of you asked if she was okay. Not one of you questioned why a grown man was assaulting a teenage girl." He pulled out his phone. "Should I call the police now? Let's discuss who's really committed a crime here. Assault, battery, theft of personal property, false imprisonment. Shall I continue?" The crowd began to disperse rapidly, people deleting videos from their phones, avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in being anywhere else. Veronica stammered an apology, backing toward her boutique. "Sir, we didn't know if we had realized—" But Darius silenced her with a look. He turned his full attention to Aisha, still on the ground, watching this powerful stranger defend her with an intensity that made her chest ache. He approached her slowly, not wanting to frighten her, and knelt down on the pavement beside her, not caring that his expensive suit would get dirty. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle, completely different from the commanding tone he had used with the others. "Can you stand? Are you hurt badly?" He offered his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Aisha took it. His palm was warm and strong, and he helped her to her feet with careful support. She swayed slightly, her legs unsteady from shock and pain. Without asking permission, Darius removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, covering the tear in her dress. The gesture was so kind, so protective, that fresh tears spilled down Aisha's cheeks. Darius turned back to Winston, his expression hardening again. "Give her back what you took." The security guard hesitated, clearly debating whether to comply. Darius's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Now." Winston's hand trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out Aisha's locket, her money, her bus pass. He held them out, but Darius didn't take them. "Give them to her, directly, and apologize." Winston looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Darius's eyes made him reconsider. He shuffled over to Aisha, not meeting her gaze, and placed the items in her hands. "Sorry," he muttered. It wasn't sincere, but Aisha didn't care. She clutched the locket to her chest like it was a lifeline, relief flooding through her. Darius pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to Veronica, who took it with shaking fingers. "That's my attorney's contact information. Expect to hear from her about assault, battery, false accusations, and emotional distress. I'll be pursuing this legally." To Winston, he said coldly, "You're finished in this industry. I have connections throughout this city, and I'll make sure everyone knows what you did today." Then he addressed the few remaining onlookers who were still filming. "Keep recording, please. Let's make sure everyone sees exactly what happened here. The whole story, not just the parts you found entertaining." Several more phones disappeared into pockets. The power dynamic had completely shifted. The people who had been so eager to condemn Aisha minutes ago now couldn't get away fast enough. Darius gently guided Aisha away from the scene, his hand light on her elbow, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. They walked slowly toward his SUV, and she realized her whole body was shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling hollowed out and fragile. Darius stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression filled with concern. "What's your name?" His voice was so kind it made her want to cry all over again. "Aisha," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Aisha, I'm Darius." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Are you okay? Do you need a doctor? I can take you to the hospital right now if you're hurt." She shook her head. Nothing was broken. Nothing that a doctor could fix anyway. He noticed her diner uniform visible under his jacket, noticed how thin she was, noticed the exhaustion in her eyes that went deeper than one bad day. "You were coming from work," she nodded. "3 jobs, she heard herself say, though she wasn't sure why she was telling him. "I work 3 jobs. Something shifted in Darius's expression. Not pity exactly, recognition, maybe, understanding. "Let me drive you home, please." Aisha hesitated. She had been taught never to get in cars with strangers, but everything about this day had already been surreal and impossible, and something in her trusted this man who had defended her when no one else would. "I promise you're safe," Darius said quietly, reading her hesitation. "After what just happened, I can't leave you here. Let me at least make sure you get home safely." She agreed with a small nod. He opened the passenger door of the SUV for her personally, waiting until she was settled before closing it gently. The interior was like nothing she had experienced. Leather seats that felt like clouds, climate control that immediately warmed her cold skin, technology she didn't understand built into every surface. Darius got into the driver's seat and started the engine. "Where to?" Aisha gave him the address of the group home, her voice quiet with shame. She knew what he would think when he saw where she lived. As they drove through the city, Darius asked gentle questions, never pushing, always giving her space to answer or not. She found herself talking, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. She told him about being orphaned at 8, about the relatives who never came for her, about the group home and the 3 jobs and the impossible dream of college. She told him about having nothing, being nothing, feeling invisible every single day, and Darius listened with complete attention, his questions thoughtful and genuine. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Aisha finally asked, unable to understand this stranger's compassion. Darius was quiet for a moment, navigating traffic, his strong hands steady on the wheel. "Because it's right," he said simply, "and because I see something in you, something strong, something that shouldn't be crushed by people who judge you for things that aren't your fault." The SUV entered Aisha's neighborhood, and the contrast was jarring. Broken streetlights, graffiti on walls, groups of people loitering on corners, buildings that looked like they might collapse with the next strong wind. Darius didn't react with the disgust she had expected. He just observed, his expression neutral and calm. She directed him to the group home, a 3-story structure with peeling paint and bars on the windows. "This is where I live," she said, her voice small and embarrassed. Darius put the vehicle in park and turned to face her. "Thank you for trusting me enough to show me." Before she could open the door, he stopped her with a gentle touch on her arm. "Can I see you again?" Aisha stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you want to?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. He was a man who drove expensive cars and wore suits that cost thousands of dollars. She was a girl who couldn't afford to skip a shift at the convenience store. They existed in different universes. Darius pulled a business card from his wallet, but this one was different from the one he had given Veronica. This one had his personal cell phone number handwritten on the back. "Call me tomorrow, please. I want to help." Aisha's defenses went up immediately. "I don't need charity." Something flickered in Darius's eyes. Respect, maybe, for her pride. "It's not charity, I can't fully explain it yet, but I need to see you again. Will you call me?" Their hands touched as she took the card, and Aisha felt electricity run through her at the contact. She looked down at the card, then back at his face, trying to understand this impossible situation. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll call." She got out of the SUV, still wearing his suit jacket, and stood on the broken sidewalk, watching as he drove away. She clutched the business card in one hand and her mother's locket in the other, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. This morning she had been invisible, worthless, alone. Now a stranger had defended her, protected her, and asked to see her again. It felt like a dream, like something that happened to other people, not to girls like her. That night, Aisha lay in her bunk at the group home, unable to sleep. The other girls asked where she had been, why she came home in a man's expensive jacket, but she didn't tell them. This felt too precious, too fragile to share. She pulled out the business card and studied it in the dim light from the hallway. Darius King, CEO, King Technologies. She grabbed her old phone and typed his name into the search engine. The results made her gasp. Darius King was a billionaire, a self-made tech entrepreneur who had built his company from nothing and sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars before starting a new venture. He was 32 years old, known for his philanthropy and his business brilliance. There were photos of him at charity galas, on the covers of business magazines, shaking hands with mayors and governors. And this man wanted to see her again. Aisha, who owned 3 shirts and worked at a convenience store. It didn't make sense, but she found herself hoping desperately that it was real. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, Darius stood in his living room, unable to stop thinking about the girl he had met today. He had called his assistant and his lawyers, set in motion the legal proceedings against Winston and the boutique, made sure there would be consequences for what had been done to Aisha. But that wasn't enough. He pulled up social media on his tablet and found the videos people had posted before he arrived. He watched Aisha being grabbed, slapped, thrown to the ground. He watched the crowd cheer and film and do nothing. His anger burned cold and focused. He made more calls to contacts in media, to friends in high places, determined to turn this into something that would create real change. But beyond the anger, beyond the need for justice, there was something else. When he had looked into Aisha's eyes, when he had seen her courage and dignity, despite everything she had endured, something had shifted in him. He had dated plenty of women from his world, successful, polished, appropriate. But he had never felt what he felt in that parking lot, kneeling beside a scared girl who had every reason to give up, but somehow hadn't. He wanted to know her, wanted to understand her strength, wanted to be part of whatever came next for her. It was too soon to call it love, but it was definitely the beginning of something that felt inevitable. The next morning, Aisha woke early as always, but this time, instead of going to her cleaning job, she did something that terrified her. She called the number on Darius's card. He answered on the second ring, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he said her name. "Aisha, I was hoping you'd call." The warmth in those words made her chest feel tight. "Can you meet me today?" he asked. "I know you have work, but could you take a few hours? I'd like to talk with you about some things." Aisha calculated quickly. She could afford to miss one shift at the diner, just this once. "Okay," she said. "When and where?" He gave her the address of a quiet cafe in a neutral neighborhood, somewhere between his world and hers. She agreed to meet him at noon. When Aisha arrived at the cafe, nervous and uncertain in her cleanest jeans and a borrowed cardigan, Darius was already there. He stood when he saw her, and his smile was genuine and warm. He had ordered her coffee and a sandwich, somehow knowing she probably hadn't eaten. They sat across from each other in a corner booth, and Darius laid out a plan that made Aisha's head spin. He wanted to press charges against Winston and the boutique. He wanted to create a scholarship fund in her mother's name for other kids in group homes. He wanted to help her get into college, not by paying her way, but by connecting her with programs and resources she didn't know existed. "Why?" Aisha interrupted, overwhelmed. "You don't even know me. Why are you doing all this?" Darius set down his coffee and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I need to tell you something about myself, about where I came from." For the next hour, Darius told her his story, how he had grown up in poverty with a single mother who worked 2 jobs, how he had been the kid in worn clothes, the one other students ignored or mocked, how he had taught himself to code using computers at the public library, how he had built his first company in a tiny apartment with borrowed equipment and pure determination, how he had faced discrimination, doubt, and countless closed doors before finally breaking through. "When I saw you on that ground yesterday," he said quietly, "I saw myself. I saw every kid who's been judged for being poor, for being in the wrong neighborhood, for not fitting into someone else's idea of acceptable. But I also saw something else." He leaned forward, his gaze holding hers. "I saw someone who hasn't let the world break her. You work 3 jobs. You're still trying to save for college, even though it seems impossible. You have every reason to be angry and bitter, but when I talked to you yesterday, all I heard was hope. That's rare, that's powerful, and I want to be someone who protects that, who helps that grow." Tears streamed down Aisha's face as she listened. For the first time in 9 years, someone saw her, really saw her. Not as a charity case, not as someone to pity or ignore, but as someone with value. "I'm not asking you to accept my help as a gift," Darius continued. "I'm asking you to see it as what you deserve, as what should have been there all along if the world was fair." He reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Aisha put her hand in his. "Let me stand beside you while you build the life you want, not above you, beside you. As equals." Aisha couldn't speak. She could only nod and cry and hold on to his hand like it was the only solid thing in a spinning world. The weeks that followed changed everything. Darius's lawyers built an airtight case against Winston, who was fired from his job and faced criminal assault charges. The boutique issued a public apology and paid a settlement that Aisha insisted be donated to organizations supporting foster children. The video of the incident, which had initially been posted to mock her, went viral again. But this time the narrative was different. This time people saw the injustice, saw Darius defending her, and public outrage grew. Support poured in from across the country. Strangers sent messages of encouragement. Journalists wanted to interview her. Aisha, who had been invisible her entire life, was suddenly very visible. And through it all, Darius was there, not controlling her story or speaking for her, but supporting her as she found her own voice. He created a foundation in honor of Aisha's mother, funding full scholarships for group home children. The press conference announcing the foundation was Aisha's first time speaking publicly. She stood at a podium in a simple blue dress that Darius had helped her pick out, looking at a room full of reporters and cameras, and she was terrified. But then she saw Darius standing to the side, and he gave her an encouraging nod. She took a breath and began to speak. She told her story, the loss, the loneliness, the struggle. But she also talked about dignity, about the danger of judging people by their circumstances, about the importance of standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every sentence. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Darius watched her with undisguised pride, and Aisha realized something that made her heart race. This wasn't just gratitude she felt for him, it was something deeper. As the weeks turned into months, Darius and Aisha spent more time together. He courted her properly and patiently, taking her to quiet dinners where they talked for hours, on walks through parks where she had never been, to museums and bookstores and coffee shops. He introduced her to his world carefully, making sure she never felt overwhelmed or out of place. But he also joined her world, volunteering at the group home with her, learning about her daily life, treating the people in her neighborhood with the same respect he showed everyone else. Aisha watched him interact with the younger kids at the home, saw how he listened to them like their dreams mattered, and she felt herself falling. She was terrified of it. The gap between their lives still seemed impossibly wide, but Darius made it feel smaller every day. One evening, as they sat on a bench watching the sunset over the city, Aisha voiced her fears. "I'm still in high school," she said quietly. "You're a billionaire who runs companies and changes people's lives. This doesn't make sense." Darius turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Love doesn't follow logic, Aisha. I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. I'm not trying to change you or mold you into someone from my world. I fell for you exactly as you are, strong, determined, kind, despite everything you've faced. That's who I want." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. "I'll wait as long as you need. I'm not going anywhere. Build your life, go to college, become whoever you want to be. I'll be here, supporting you, believing in you. And if you decide you want me to be part of that life, I'll be the happiest man alive." Months passed. Aisha graduated from high school at the top of her class, wearing a cap and gown she had earned through late nights of studying between work shifts. The scholarship from Darius's foundation meant she could finally quit 2 of her 3 jobs. She kept the diner job, though, because Betty had been kind to her when others weren't, and because she liked the routine, the normalcy of it. She had been accepted to 3 different colleges and chose the one with the best pre-med program. She wanted to be a doctor, wanted to help people the way no one had helped her. Darius was in the audience at her graduation, holding flowers, cheering louder than anyone when her name was called. After the ceremony, as other graduates celebrated with their families, Darius approached her with a look in his eyes that made her heart pound. He didn't get down on one knee. Not yet. He stood in front of her, holding her hands, and spoke words he had clearly been planning. "I have something to say, and I can't wait anymore. I'm not proposing. You're too young, and you have college ahead, and I respect that, but I need you to know where I stand." His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "I'm promising you, right here and now, that I will wait. I will support you through college and beyond. I will love you every day, and when you're ready, when the time is right, if you'll have me, I want to spend my life with you. I want to build a future where we fight for people like you were, where we use whatever resources I have to make the world less cruel. I want to do that with you, Aisha. Only you." Aisha didn't let him finish. She pulled him down and kissed him there in the middle of the graduation crowd, not caring who saw or what they thought. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled through her tears. "I don't need you to wait," she said. "I already know. You saw me at my lowest point and you treated me with dignity. You didn't save me. You stood beside me and helped me save myself. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." She touched his face gently. "I love you, Darius King. I love you for who you are and what you stand for and how you make me believe I can be anything." Around them, other graduates and their families had stopped to watch. When Aisha and Darius kissed again, the crowd burst into applause and cheers. The years that followed were filled with growth and change and love that deepened with every challenge they faced together. Aisha started college, throwing herself into her studies with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her life. She thrived academically, making the dean's list every semester. Darius supported her but gave her space to build her own identity, to make her own friends, to succeed on her own terms. They navigated the complications of their relationship, the age difference, the wealth gap, the public attention, with honesty and patience. There were hard moments, times when Aisha felt overwhelmed or insecure, times when the pressure of being the girlfriend of a prominent billionaire felt like too much. But Darius was always there, steady and sure, reminding her that she was enough exactly as she was. The foundation they had created together grew beyond anything they had imagined. Hundreds of kids from group homes and foster care received scholarships. Winston's assault case became legal precedent, leading to new protections for vulnerable people in public spaces. The boutique where it all happened went out of business, unable to recover from the public backlash. Darius bought the building and turned it into a community center, offering free services to low-income families. The white Mercedes, the car that had started everything, sat in Darius's garage untouched for 3 years. On Aisha's 21st birthday, he gave her the keys. "Now you can touch it whenever you want," he said with a smile. "It's yours." She laughed and cried and kissed him, knowing it wasn't really about the car. It was about how far they had come together. A few months later, on a quiet evening after Aisha had finished volunteering at the group home where she had once lived, Darius picked her up in that same white Mercedes. She slid into the passenger seat, comfortable now in a world that had once seemed impossible. They drove to a scenic overlook where the entire city spread out below them in a blanket of lights. Darius parked and turned to her, and Aisha saw something different in his expression. Nervous energy, determination, love so deep it made her chest ache. "I know I said I would wait," Darius began, "but it's been 3 years and I can't wait anymore. Not for this." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Aisha's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring that caught the city lights and threw them back as rainbows. "Aisha, you are the strongest, kindest, most incredible person I have ever known. You've made me better. You've given my life purpose beyond business and money. You've shown me what real courage looks like." His voice shook slightly. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life standing beside you, loving you, building a future together?" Aisha didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, already reaching for him. "Yes, yes, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they held each other as the city lights blurred through their happy tears. They sat in that car, the same car that had brought them together in the worst possible way, and talked about their future, about the life they would build, about the family they would create, about the work they would continue doing to help people who were where Aisha had once been. They talked until the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new day beginning just like their new life together. The wedding came a year later, after Aisha had completed her undergraduate degree and been accepted to medical school. It was a beautiful ceremony that blended both their worlds, elegant but not ostentatious, filled with people they genuinely loved rather than business contacts and social obligations. Kids from the group home sat in the front row. Betty from the diner cried through the entire ceremony. Darius's mother, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to raise him, beamed with pride. And when Darius and Aisha exchanged vows, promising to love each other through whatever came, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. They had written their own vows, and Aisha's words cut straight to everyone's heart. "You found me when I was broken and treated me like I was whole. You saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. You didn't rescue me from my life. You walked into it and helped me transform it into something beautiful. I promise to love you with the same fierce certainty you've always shown me. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner. And I promise that we will use the blessings we've been given to lift others up, the way you lifted me." Years passed in happiness and purpose. Aisha became Dr. Aisha King, a physician who specialized in working with underserved communities. She never forgot where she came from, and she made sure her patients, many of them poor, many of them treated as invisible by the healthcare system, always felt seen and valued. Darius continued to build businesses, but every venture now had a social mission at its core. Together they created programs that changed lives, that gave opportunities to people who had none, that fought against the kind of cruelty and injustice Aisha had once faced. They had children of their own eventually, and they raised them to understand privilege and responsibility, to see people's humanity rather than their circumstances. And sometimes when Aisha was driving that white Mercedes, with her mother's locket hanging from the rearview mirror, she would think back to that terrible afternoon when everything changed. She would remember the pain and fear and humiliation, but she would also remember the moment Darius stepped out of his SUV and saw her, really saw her, and chose to act. She would remember learning that even in the darkest moments kindness could appear, that one person standing up could change everything, that love could find you in the most unexpected places, even on a sidewalk where you'd been beaten down, even when you thought you were too broken to be loved. The worst moment of her life had led to the greatest love she could imagine, and together they made sure that other people's worst moments didn't have to define them either. The wedding came a year later, after Aisha had completed her undergraduate degree and been accepted to medical school. It was a beautiful ceremony that blended both their worlds, elegant but not ostentatious, filled with people they genuinely loved rather than business contacts and social obligations. Kids from the group home sat in the front row. Betty from the diner cried through the entire ceremony. Darius's mother, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to raise him, beamed with pride. And when Darius and Aisha exchanged vows, promising to love each other through whatever came, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. They had written their own vows, and Aisha's words cut straight to everyone's heart. You found me when I was broken and treated me like I was whole. You saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. You didn't rescue me from my life. You walked into it and helped me transform it into something beautiful. I promise to love you with the same fierce certainty you've always shown me. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner. And I promise that we will use the blessings we've been given to lift others up, the way you lifted me.